Coming up, corruption at the FBI and DOJ. Welcome to a special investigative episode of Just Facts News, where we bring you thoroughly vetted facts that other newscasts have ignored or distorted. In a recent episode of MSNBC's flagship news show, Alex Wagner Tonight, Wagner asked former FBI Director James Comey what a second Trump administration would mean for the FBI, and Comey replied,
"Oh, serious, for the Justice Department and the FBI, because Trump is coming for those institutions. He knows their power, and I think he has regrets that he didn't work hard enough to corrupt them last time. So he's coming for them, and that's a danger for all Americans. He's going to put people in positions in those organizations. He didn't have all-stars the last time. He'll have the bottom of the barrel this time, but people who will want to do his will, and that should worry every American. This election matters. Because of a reason like that, people have to participate. You cannot sit on the sideline. I don't care how you feel about Joe Biden, you must vote for him because the consequences on the other side are too severe.
Here's what Wagner and Comey failed to tell you. Trump actually stated that he plans to clean out corruption from the FBI, and there is ample evidence that corruption is rampant in these agencies. For a prime example, consider the case of Larry Nassar, the infamous gymnastics doctor who sexually abused more than 100 girls. Horrifically, Nassar abused dozens of these girls after the FBI was giving compelling evidence that Nassar was a serial child sex predator. As documented by the Inspector General of the DOJ, approximately 70 or more young athletes were allegedly sexually abused by Nassar under the guise of medical treatment over the course of more than a year after USA Gymnastics first reported allegations about Nassar to the FBI. Notably, the state of Michigan put a stop to this abuse, not the FBI, even though the evidence handed to the FBI included graphic information from 3 gymnasts and a thumb drive containing videos of Nassar placing his bare hands in the area of the groin and buttocks of female athletes, PowerPoints made by Nassar that describe female body parts with non-medical terminology like coochie, a video made by Nassar with a caption that states, "To boldly go where no man has gone before," in most of our young gymnasts, hopefully. Revealing that this was not just a case of gross incompetence, the Inspector General found that the FBI supervisor who was handed this evidence claimed the thumb drive had no evidentiary value and kept it to himself for years. The FBI's documentation of an interview with one of Nassar's victims included materially false information and omitted material information. At least 2 FBI agents made materially false statements to the Inspector General about their roles in this affair. One of those FBI agents actually applied for a job with USA Gymnastics while offering to create an FBI public statement that would place USA Gymnastics in a positive light. FBI field offices in Detroit and Los Angeles failed to report the abuse to state or local authorities. Nevertheless, the DOJ declined to prosecute any of the FBI officials involved in this affair. Another stunning example of FBI and DOJ corruption is the case of Jeffrey Epstein. In 1996, a woman named Maria Farmer reported Epstein and his associates to the FBI for molesting children. But the FBI did nothing to stop it for another decade, while Epstein and company assaulted, raped, and trafficked dozens of girls on hundreds of occasions. Then in 2005, it seemed like Epstein was about to be held accountable when the family of a 14-year-old girl reported to the Palm Beach police that Epstein had molested their daughter. The police responded with an aggressive investigation that identified approximately 20 girls between the ages of 14 and 17 who were sexually abused by Epstein. However, the Palm Beach police alerted the FBI, and the FBI took control of the case and shut out the police. The DOJ then crafted a secretive plea deal with Epstein. This consisted of a non-prosecution agreement that smeared Epstein's schoolgirl victims as prostitutes and allowed Epstein to plead guilty to 2 relatively minor violations of state law. The DOJ made that deal with Epstein, despite the fact that they had identified 40 young women who could be characterized as victims of Epstein under a federal law against the sexual exploitation and other abuse of children. Under this deal, Epstein only served 13 months in jail, and during most of that time, he was allowed to leave the jail for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, under a work release program at a nonprofit that Epstein ran. As part of this deal, the DOJ promised it would never press any criminal charges against Epstein or any of his potential co-conspirators for an array of federal child sex crimes committed in Florida from 2001 to 2007. Moreover, a federal court found that the DOJ concealed this non-prosecution agreement from Epstein's victims in violation of the Crime Victims' Rights Act. This law requires the government to keep crime victims informed and involved with any legal actions in their cases. The court also found that the DOJ deceived the victims by telling them to be patient while the investigation was ongoing, when in fact, the feds had already agreed to never prosecute Epstein for the crimes he committed against them. After his release from jail, Epstein switched tactics to better conceal his crimes. According to the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands, where Epstein owned 2 private islands, Epstein began to focus on procuring and abusing women from Eastern Europe because their immigration status and language barriers made them more isolated, dependent, and vulnerable to Epstein's abuse and manipulation. Those victims included numerous girls between the age of 12 and 17 years old who were forced into sexual servitude in service of Epstein's desires and those of his associates. In 2019, the DOJ finally arrested Epstein for sex trafficking of minors. The DOJ then placed Epstein in a federal prison run by a division of the DOJ, and only 5 weeks later, this uber-wealthy financier with hordes of friends in high places was dead and unable to talk about what had happened. Putting aside the issue of whether Epstein actually killed himself, the facts are clear that DOJ and FBI employees repeatedly placed his life in danger and systematically mishandled evidence that could incriminate others in his death and sex crimes. First, they placed Epstein in a cell with a murderous, hulking ex-cop, which is a death trap for any child molester. Less than 2 weeks later, they found Epstein in the middle of the night in a semi-conscious state with a rope and friction marks around his neck. Despite a court order requiring the prison to preserve footage of near Epstein's cell during the strangulation, they failed to do so and also lost the backup due to, quote, technical errors. Then they took Epstein off suicide watch just 1 day after the strangulation without determining whether Epstein was attacked by his cellmate or tried to commit suicide. 1 day before Epstein's eventual death, a federal court unsealed more than 2,000 pages of lawsuit records that named and implicated wealthy and powerful people in Epstein's sex crimes, as well as federal officials in covering up those crimes. On that same day, they removed Epstein's new cellmate and didn't replace him, even though a prison psychologist sent an email to over 70 prison staffers stating that Epstein needs to be housed with an appropriate cellmate, a common measure to prevent suicide. They also placed a hoard of linens in Epstein's cell, which is prohibited because they can be used to create nooses. Then they left Epstein alone in his cell for nearly 8 hours on the night he died, despite the fact that they were required to check all inmates in his unit at least twice per hour, and they were only 15 feet from Epstein's cell. They then falsified records to show that they had checked on Epstein, a violation of federal law punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Nonetheless, the DOJ dismissed all charges pending against the 2 officers who falsified the records and declined to prosecute others who falsely certified inmate count slips and round sheets on the day before and the day of Epstein's death. They also failed to record footage from 9 of the 11 surveillance cameras around Epstein's cell on the night of his death, including one that showed Epstein's cell door and cell tier. On top of all that, the FBI agents who searched Epstein's New York City mansion found and then abandoned a sexually explicit trove of photos and CDs labeled with the names of young females alongside people other than Epstein. This allowed one of Epstein's most notorious accomplices to take the evidence and potentially scrub it before giving it back to the feds. To this day, the DOJ hasn't revealed the names of the people that were written beside the young female on Epstein's CDs. And while the FBI and DOJ let these child sex abusers and their enablers skate, they devoted enormous resources and even broke the law to go after Donald Trump. In 2019, Obama appointee Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General of the DOJ, released the results of his probe into the FBI's investigation of the Trump campaign's alleged ties to Russia, contradicting strident claims from Democrats like Adam Schiff, who declared that the DOJ and FBI did nothing wrong. Horowitz found that the DOJ and FBI made at least 17 significant errors or omissions in warrant applications to spy on a Trump advisor by using the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA for short. This law supposedly requires strict standards to protect the civil liberties of American citizens. Horowitz also found multiple factual assertions in the FISA application were inaccurate, incomplete, or unsupported by appropriate documentation based on information the FBI had in its possession at the time the application was filed. Horowitz also found the DOJ and FBI made many additional errors in the Woods procedures to obtain these warrants, which require that every factual assertion in a FISA application be verified. Horowitz also found that the DOJ and FBI used the discredited Steele dossier as a central and essential component of its warrant applications. Likewise, the FISA court itself reported violations of the government's duty of candor in all 4 applications to spy on Trump's advisor and stated that these actions constituted unlawful surveillance and search. Yet Horowitz soft-pedaled these facts by saying, "We did not find documentary evidence or testimonial evidence of intentional misconduct on the part of the FBI case agents who assisted the DOJ in obtaining the warrants. But we also did not receive satisfactory explanations for the errors or problems we identified." That's a mouthful. So in plain words, the FBI and DOJ didn't confess that they planned to break the law, but they had no reasonable explanations for breaking it. Building on Horowitz's investigation, Special Counsel John Durham documented that the FBI opened a full investigation of Trump campaign officials based on unvetted hearsay information. Senior FBI officials disregarded intel about an alleged plot by Hillary Clinton to link Trump to Russia. The FBI repeatedly used the Steele dossier to obtain warrants, even though they couldn't corroborate a single substantive allegation in it. High-ranking government officials suppressed evidence that the Steele dossier's falsehoods came from people with deep ties to the Russian government, Hillary Clinton, and the Democratic National Committee. Furthermore, the FBI offered $1 million taxpayer dollars to the author of the Steele dossier for dirt on Donald Trump and came up with nothing. This is the kind of corruption that both Comey and MSNBC failed to mention. Each one of these cases involved multiple examples of malfeasance by the FBI and DOJ with no meaningful accountability. And Just Facts has found more than a dozen other cases like them. Thank you for joining us. Tune in next time for more thoroughly vetted facts that other newscasts ignore or distort.